Welcome to Dylan Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Sessler. Today is episode 15, where I have an incredible guest lined up for you. But before we get to the guest, don't forget to purchase your copy of Defy the Darkness. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, it's on other places I don't even know. And don't forget to join my inspirational text platform. Just go ahead and text HI to 1-608-336-4480. Now, my guest today, I'm so excited to bring you guys. He's awesome, right? Like my guest is an Air Force veteran, a future rower for the Fight or Die, an all U.S., all veteran ocean rowing team that's going to row 3,000 miles from like La Gomera, and he'll correct me when I'm finished. La Gomera off the coast of Spain to Antigua. Their row is dedicated to helping veterans with mental health issues, and I think this is just pretty much a damn good introduction already, but my next guest is Chad Miller. Chad, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I connected with you on TikTok, and if you don't follow him on TikTok, what's your username on TikTok so people can follow you?
Well, right now I ran it off of just Chad for a while, but then after reaching out to the guys at Fight or Die, I told them like, hey, I was reaching out with a lot of guys on Mill Talk, so right now it's just at Fight or Die.
Okay.
That is Fight or OAR Die. So it's that's where I'm running right now. Most of my videos, pretty much all my videos, are going to be about the row, about the upcoming training for our team, as well as the 2021 team that is prepping right now. So
for sure, man. Tell me. So before we get into the Fight or Die stuff, tell me where you came from. Like why go to Fight or Die? Why even make that an option or an idea for you? Like, tell me your story. Who are you?
So crazy, yeah, crazy stories. So joined the Air Force straight out of high school in 2006. I graduated, joined straight, and went into tech school for my technical training with a guy named Nick Ron, who's actually you'll hear about him later. He's actually on my rowing team.
Cool.
But went through tech school. I got to my first duty station in Seymour Johnson. I was there for 2 weeks. Was told, hey, don't unpack your bags, you're deploying. It wasn't really a deployment. It was more of a cakewalk for us. It was a Qatar, but it was a nice little go to the desert, get hot, get your boots wet kind of thing. And I made it back from that little cakewalk, and within a matter of 2 weeks, didn't even unpack my bags again. They said, hey, how do you feel about running a heavy machine gun on convoys to in Buka, Iraq? And at the time, Buka was a detaining ops mission for some of our guys. So I said, yeah, you know what better way to spend your 21st birthday than sitting behind a 50 cal machine gun running convoys? So I ended up in Camp Buka, Iraq in 2008, running convoys as the Delta gunner for Scorpion 1-5. And my lead gunner ended up being my former roommate in tech school, former roommate for my first deployment. Nick Ron was our lead 50 cal gunner. And in our Charlie truck, we had Tommy Hester. And the reason that those names are so important is because 3 or 4 gunners we had on that convoy are actually guys that I'll tell you about later on. Some of the best guys I ever met, some of the guys that are going to pretty much take on the world with me here soon. But yeah, I went through 5 deployments, active duty. I got out in 2012 when I came to those crossroads of being married with a kid on the way. And I got out, did some stuff for cars, but I said I'd never join the reserves. I got out on the 17th of October. I was at my first reserve drill on November 1st. So you see how well that played out for me. But throughout my, I think what kind of led me to this position was throughout my years prior to military, I always had a thing for vets, even before I joined, and that's kind of what got me in. And in 2009, I was actually rooming with Nick, my other buddy who's going to be on the boat with us, and we were in the middle of Balad, Iraq. I was dealing with some personal issues back home that actually sent me in a frenzy where my mental health was not good, and I did not really know how to handle it too well. So I found myself in a dark place at that time. He was actually in his own little dark place, which was a whole confusing story because we were roommates. And for 3 months, I didn't talk to anybody, and I kind of found myself secluded. My own leadership kind of shunned me at the time, and that's a rabbit hole that you don't want to chase.
Yeah.
And I found myself spiraling out of control to where I went and talked to the base chaplain just to kind of get some advice. And needless to say, it was not the chaplain I would ever recommend anyone to talk to. Pretty much told me, hey, you make some mistakes, and you seem like a good guy, but sometimes you make mistakes that are unforgivable. And growing up as a kid whose parents were pastors, being told that you've done something unforgivable, or that you were heading down a good path, but you made some mistakes. And I was like, well, that's that messes with your head.
Right.
It messes with your head a lot. And I worked for 2 days, and by the second day of working, after talking to the chaplain, I come to grips with the fact that I was numb. I didn't really want to live anymore. And I mean, this is in the middle of Iraq. This is in the middle of a deployment.
Right.
My roommate, Nick, had actually just come back from seeing an Army guy who decided that he got a Dear John letter while he was gone, and he was the first one to arrive. So he was in the process of dealing with that as well. What was going through my mind that he had no idea about. So found myself working in the middle of the day. I stepped out, and unfortunately, and I hate to say it, but I called my younger brother and I told him, hey man, I'm sorry for all the mistakes I made. I called my mom and told her in my mind, I was ready to go.
Yeah.
And I stepped out back, and I just sat down in this porta john for a few minutes, and I was ready to go. And I had one of my NCOs, Gary, caught something was wrong and came out, and at the right time knocked on the door. And when I say we sat out and smoked for hours, and the dude had every reason to go and report and go and say, hey, this guy's off the wall, put him in the brig, do this. And Gary's like, no, man, I'm sitting with you. You're having a rough patch. I see you ain't got nobody, but I'm somebody. And up until about 2 years ago, Gary, mind you, this happened in 2009.
Yeah.
Up until 2 years ago, Gary doesn't even remember this. He doesn't remember the fact that he stepped out and noticed it. And that's a day I'll never forget, and I know that my family won't forget it because they never bring it up. They've never brought it up. But since that time, I found myself feeling that low. I did not even think it was possible. Like the next day I sat down and thought about it. I was like, man, I can't believe I went there. So, get back from that deployment, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna step up my game. I'm gonna try to change some things, and completely turned my military career around. Started being a positive influence for other people. So come the time for me to get out, I got out, and I kind of lost touch with Nick, Tommy, and those guys, and it was just a void. When you got out, it's like I get out, I'm in the reserves, but like, where's my boys at? Like, right. I felt lost. My wife at the time was active duty as well, so I moved to New York, to Buffalo, before she got here. And I know when she got out, she felt the same way. It was just kind of like, it's that camaraderie that you miss, and you usually call your boys when you hang out and stuff. So over time, I kind of lost touch of that, and it kind of ate away at me. And I always did my thing. And then fast forward to 2018, I had already graduated, got my degree, and was working on cars, opened my own auto shop, and things were not going so well. And of course, when you're collecting $400 in 2 months, that floods over to family life. And my wife we had just had our third kid. I just got back from a deployment, and we're talking, I'm not bringing home money. She's in a bachelor's program with 3 kids, and it started to build up. And when you're not doing something as a man and you feel like you're not providing for your family, that is the biggest kick in the nuts I have ever received in my life. And it was, I would come home numb every day, and it was just, I started getting that place again, but I hadn't talked to any of the boys in a while. So one day I just kind of, I found myself in that same mental state I was in 2009. And I knew I needed to do something drastic. So because I was heading down that rabbit hole again. So I ended up calling Nick Ron, who's our skipper for our 2022 team. I called him because he'd been my roommate on 4 deployments. We've been through a ton of stuff together. So he was my first call, and first thing out of his mouth was like, hey man, like, it was like we never stopped talking. It was crazy. It was just within a matter of a few minutes, he's giving me advice, and he's like, yo, I want to start this nonprofit. I want to start this thing called Warriors Next Adventure. And I want to, you know, I started doing these hikes, and I find out that recreational therapy is the way to go. And like, I take these guys out. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I'm listening to his passion with this stuff. And I'm like, man, like, I'm in a dark place, but maybe this is what I need. Maybe I just need to get out for a little bit. We talked about, he says, you know what? My first mountain climb is going to be in New York in 2 months. He came up here. We climbed Mount Marcy, the tallest peak in New York. And that feeling of being with the guys and being out there and completing a mission again, I guess you could say, it got the blood pumping again. It got me passionate about what I was doing. And some of the guys I met on that hike to this day, I still talk to. So he founded this wonderful nonprofit, Warriors Next Adventure, with recreational therapy. Calls me 2 months later, says, hey man, I want to get you on as an ambassador. You got the passion for it. And I found that by helping veterans, like, that was my calling, like helping other vets get through and not be where I was, because there's not a lot of people. I mean, even guys I work with, there's not a lot of people that know my full story on that.
Right.
And like, I've gotten to the point where it's okay to be vulnerable. If you're vulnerable to other people and you can come out and say, hey man, I've been there. When they get to that point, they're going to reach out and say, hey man, remember we talked, you were there. I'm getting there. And I've been there. I know the resources. I've been fortunate enough to have good people in my life to step in at the right time. And so after I came on with Warriors Next Adventure as an ambassador, I led a hike up with one of our guys that was supposed to be climbing Mount Marcy with me in 2020. He ended up going to Texas for training at 29 and passed away in his dorm room. So I reached out a couple months later. I called his mom because I was real close friends with him. I said, hey, I'm climbing Mount Marcy. Your son wanted to do this with me. I got 11 vets. We're going to take you to the top of that mountain. And we got her to the top in October of 2020. And the feeling that I had for these guys when I got to the top, and these guys were thanking me for, thanks for taking us up here, man. It's the best experience. And I'm like reminding them, I didn't do this. I didn't climb this mountain, man. This was all you. And reminding these guys that this is where your passion is. So it just helping vets was a huge feeling.
Yeah.
And then probably about 2 weeks before that climb, I was in like super mode, and I was back to my passion. Everything was going great with the family. The kids were doing great. It was just, life was good. And part of the thing that he does with Warriors Next Adventure is Nick does podcast. And he sends me a text. He says, hey, you got to tune in this podcast. This dude's absolutely insane. So I was like, well, intrigued, because I'm usually one to, like, my mom knows I'm usually one to make rash decisions, and I'm very impulsive, partially because of my ADHD, and the other part because I can't sit still. I think it was a lot of the military stuff. Just, I like to keep going. So I get on this podcast. He's interviewing Bryant with Fight or Die. He's the president of Fight or Die, or the former president of Fight or Die. And I log in 5 minutes into this thing. He's talking about, yeah, you know, we hit these waves out there, and I was rowing. When you row across that ocean, and I'm like, this dude didn't just say what I thought he said. He just said he rowed across an ocean. So I'm thinking small rowboat. That's the first thing I thought. So Nick's talking to this guy on a podcast, and I'm in the group chat in the bottom, right on Facebook Live. I am blowing that chat up, and I'm saying, hey man, I need to know more. Like, I gotta know more. And Nick's sitting there, he's looking down at the chat, he's talking to Brian. He keeps saying, man, one of my ambassadors for Warriors Next Adventure, who I deployed with in Iraq and Afghanistan, he's like, this dude is all over this, and I'm gonna have him reach out to you. Little did Nick know that I was gonna be dragging his ass into it with me. It happened. So it took a little bit. I mean, I let it sit for like 2 or 3 days. Looked at the wife. I said, hey, what do you think about me rowing across the Atlantic Ocean? And she was like, you know, just sleep on it a couple of days, it'll go away. And a month later, I said, hey, I'm serious. And I started telling them, like, check out this organization. I said, these guys, their mission is twofold. Like, they set up community safety nets for veterans' mental health, which is something that I am just very passionate about.
Yeah.
And the second thing is they send a 4-man rowing team 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean for veterans' mental health. I was like, they work with Denver University. They get these guys the scholarships to go help vets. I'm like, this is where I'm at. And she's like, well, I think you're high, but you know what? She's like, you supported me every time with everything else I've done. You stood by my side, and she goes, I supported you. And if you're going to row this ocean, you know, you need to do the research, you need to do the training, and you need to be ready to go. So that's where I started my quest to find out more about this and actually get more involved. And so I reached out. I sent an email to Brian over at Fight or Die, and I said, hey, man, I need to know. I need to know if I apply for this, what does your selection process look like? He's like, look, if you apply individually, there's a chance that you could get on a team. But we're going to be honest with you, getting on a team is going to be slim unless you can find a team. He's like, you find a team, we can almost guarantee you a slot depending on how your team looks. So I did the noble thing. I called Nick. I was like, yo, man, you ran this podcast. You're the one that got me hooked on this. You're rowing an ocean with me. And the first response was like, I got the middle finger on the FaceTime, hung up the phone call. So I gave it a couple weeks and I sent him a message. I was like, dude, I'm telling you, like, I'm feeling this row. He's like, I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about rowing an ocean. I just like, we're gonna kayak up the St. Cruz River. Me and Will are gonna do the whole thing. And I'm like, well, that's the thing, man. I'm thinking about Will too. And I really played him against his own cards. And he really regrets bringing me on a Warriors Next Adventure right away because he said, I don't know how I feel about this rowing, man. He goes, let me think about it. I said, look, that's weird because Warriors Next Adventure, we do recreational therapy for vets. And he's like, oh, I know what we do. And I'm like, well, what is your slogan? And he's like, don't do that to me. I said, what's the slogan? Warriors Next Adventure. He said, explore everything. I said, how are you going to say you explored everything when your roommate from 3 of 4 deployments together asked you to row an ocean? He's like, you son of a bitch, I am in. And then I looked down my list. I had written guys' names down and who I wanted to call. And he stops me. He's like, dude, if we're going, I think we should call Tommy Hester. I think we should call Will Jansen. They were both in Buca with us. And he goes, I think that's who we should call. I looked down my list of the top 2 guys. I said, all right, man, let's do it. So I called Will. Within 2 minutes, I knew Will was on board when he started asking questions. Yeah. I called Nick. Nick goes, I asked Tommy. Tommy said, you're insane. And then asked, what size is the boat? He goes, once he asked me that, I knew we were set. So these guys are, like I said, I've known these guys. I was stationed with Will at Seymour and Nick as well. And Tommy, we spent 6 months running guns back and forth to Baghdad or Basra area up to Safwan Hill, Safwan Village in southern Iraq. So you're not going to find a better team. And the thing is, we tried to make it to where they had Army guys do this. They had Marines do it. They had slotted a Navy team. And we were actually pushing for 23 was when we were going to go. But they never had an Air Force vet row it. And I said, well, if we're going to do an Air Force vet, why don't we do a whole team of Air Force vets? Yeah. And I was like, and let's break it down even farther. Our security forces, we lead the Air Force in suicides. And all of us work from the same Warriors Next Adventure nonprofit. We all work with vets. Why don't we take our team, all security forces guys, all Air Force vets, and row this ocean? And so, these guys jumped on board. And I think they underestimated us a little bit at first because they didn't know how we were. Because obviously they, you got the Air Force guys that coming over here saying, hey, we got this and we want to break the world record. So you're going to be skeptical until they realize that we weren't playing around and we've actually known each other for 12 years plus for all of us.
So I gotta start asking questions here. So first of all, what's the world record to do this?
So the world record is broken down into multiple classes. There's a race class, there's an open class, there's a few other classes because it's broken down. You have your different boats. You got your solo rowers. which is insane to me that someone solo rows 3,000 miles.
Right.
Because once you leave, you don't see anybody.
Yeah.
Like you will see the service boat maybe once, but they have 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. But for the open class boat, which is what we're in, as an open class rower, the fight or die team holds the record right now at 50 days. In 2019, they broke the world record at 50 days. We have a 21 team that wants to beat that. And my team right now, I mean, we know how weather conditions can get. We know that you can have a bad year with hurricane winds, and you could have still days. We're not gonna know until we get out there, but we want to shoot for 45 days. We want that world record.
How do you?
But
I mean, how do you feel about this? About being on the water, right? Obviously, this is Atlantic Ocean for 45 to 50 days. How do you feel about that?
you know what, I don't know. I think it's more of we've been prepping mentally, we've been prepping physically, but I joke around with my wife all the time when she says, I don't know how you're gonna train for this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 3 days prior to the race, they're gonna have us dump all of our gear and they're gonna go through it. I've done so many bag drags in the military. I've been prepared for this day. She's like, well, what are you gonna do when you're sitting in the boat for 12 hours at a time? I said, you know how many times I sat in a tower or in a turret looking out of the desert for 12, 18 hours? I'm like, the military's prepared me for this and they don't even know it. And I'm like, I'll be out there with all my guys. It's gonna be something that we'll never forget.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of unknowns
Yeah.
for me, especially with the training and stuff. People ask me all the time. Someone asked me today on social media, was asking me, they're like, hey, are you scared to do this? And I said, right now, no. But I know for a fact, and from talking to everybody else, once I get out there and I get that first storm and I can't see the shore and the boat is rocking, I'm hitting 20-foot waves and I feel like we're gonna flip, I guarantee you there will be some fear.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think there's anyone out there that could go through that and not have some kind of fear of the unknown.
Right.
I mean, a lot of us aren't big fans of being in the ocean farther than we can see down.
That's why I joined the Army.
And my son's been a total a-hole all week of watching Shark Week. So I keep telling him we're not watching Shark Week till I get back, but he's been all about it. So
Man, I mean, it's such a, and I'm looking at the Fight or Die website and just like looking
Yeah.
at these boats. Like, is it like two people always have to be rowing, two people can rest, or like tell me about this experience.
So the way this is broken down is the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge is probably the safest. It's considered one of the largest and one of the most the toughest rowing challenge in the world is what they say it's considered. When we leave, we're going to be out with about 35 other teams from all over the world. Ocean rowing is not a huge thing in the U.S. We're trying to make that a huge thing, especially for the veterans' mental health aspect. Mm-hmm. Brian and Bo first did the race in 2018, and they got the boat. That was their main purpose, was we need to do something drastic to show vets, like, this is how, there is not an end. Like, you think you're down and out, go do something amazing, go big. Yeah. You can go out there and you can conquer the world. Just put your mind to it. So they got that was their main reason for choosing this event, was because it would test you both physically and mentally and push you to limits that you didn't think were possible. So we're going to start off at La Gomera off the coast of Spain, which is going to be, it's pretty much one of the same starting points around where Christopher Columbus departed. Sure. We're going to start heading kind of southeast or southwest to clear the equator and try to hit the trade winds. And we'll be rowing 3,000 miles from there to the British harbor of Antigua. And that will be our final point. It's a 28-foot ocean rower. There's only 2 places that make this ocean rower in the world, and ours is the only American-made ocean rower. We made sure that when they selected it, it was American-made. As far as our boat goes, when you see our boat, I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. Yeah. It is a mixture of all the services when they painted that boat. It is a battleship grade for the Navy. We have the Marine Corps for the red letters. We have the Army lettering on it. And for the front, which is just badass being an Air Force guy, we got the nose piece of an A10, which is when we saw the Whoopie, which is what they call the boat, the Whoopie, when we saw it for the first time, I was like, okay, I hear you. Like I'm intrigued. And I think you have two support boats while you're doing this the whole time, but everything is 100% self-sustained. So once we leave that harbor, it is self-sustained. We'll be rowing in shifts of 2-hour shifts between me and the guys. 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day. Unless we run into inclement weather or something like that, where it's just more, degrading to keep rowing, and we're going to be pushed back either way, or we're just killing ourselves on it. We will have a para anchor that we can deploy that's like an underwater parachute to keep us from moving north to south or moving too far during heavy weather, and we might have to sit it out. It could be anywhere from 2, 3, 4 days of just hard hitting storms where we just can do nothing.
Yeah.
So you got to mentally prepare for just being trapped in a place where you have 2 sleeping quarters. So 2 people are inside and the other guys are just sitting out there enduring the suck and embracing it. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're going to have we have a freshwater maker on the boat. Anything that happens to that boat is broken down. We have it broken down into 4 sections. We have Nick, who's our skipper, who is and the reason we chose that was because once he started Warriors Next Adventure, he does a lot of public speaking and stuff like that, but he's been notorious for being our head guy for years. And he knows when to make a good call. And we want to leave kind of the final decisions up to him. We're always obviously going to try to make them as a team if possible. But we have Will Jansen, who's going to be our medic and our navigator. And definitely there's some heavy qualities when it comes to some of these guys. Tommy, Nick, Will, these guys can fix pretty much anything. I own an auto repair shop. I worked for GM for 7 years when I got out. So, when it comes to fixing stuff, we should be okay. But if the water maker goes down, we will try to have a spare. If that goes down, we will have to hand pump, and it could take hours before we even get a gallon of water. And each rower consumes about 14 quarts a day.
Yeah.
So you got to assume that if someone's pumping for hours just to get a gallon, you're going to want your engineer off the oars as much as possible, getting that thing back up and running.
Right.
The rudder brakes or our self-stability device in the back, we will hook a rope up to that rudder, and someone will be awake while the other 2 are rowing to make sure they steer. So it's there's going to be a lot of challenges when it comes to this with the navigation stuff of checking in, but we want to break that world record, but we've also said at the same time that you start watching some of these videos and stuff, these guys are out in the ocean and they're running pods of 200 dolphins. Yeah. That's not an opportunity you're going to get again. Right. And we will have to get out of the boat to clean the barnacles off the bottom when we start slowing down a little bit. But we see a pod of dolphins. It's about the experience. Yeah. It's about 4 of us that have been through some of the toughest moments of life together. Right. And we're doing this to prove to other vets like this is possible. So we're going to make sure that we document the hell out of everything. We share our story. We share with these guys of saying, hey, this is what you can do. Like, you can feel like you're down and out. Nick survived a failed suicide attempt back in the late 2015, 2016. He survived a suicide attempt. So we've all been there. Yeah. We've all been to that point. But it's what you do when you're at that point. You got to make a decision. Right. And, you got to find your reason to keep pushing. And so if I have to row in a boat for 50 days, I'm going to row in a boat for 50 days and I'm going to be miserable as hell to make sure, even if one person catches it and says, you know what, I think I can do this. I'm going to get myself out of here and I'm going to call these guys, or I'm going to, my mind is capable of so much more. This dude was down and out and ready to end his own life. And he just rode 3,000 miles across the ocean to prove a point to other people that this is possible. This isn't, there's a lot in it for me. I'm curious on what's going to happen. We've all been talking about, we want to know what that feels like to lose sight of the shore. But when I get to the end of that race, I want to know how my life is going to change. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it's going to affect a lot of stuff. And I'm curious on that. And I'm excited for the challenges. Like, are we going to get to the end and say what's next? Yeah. But you never know. But when you talk to Will and I asked Will, and we did a podcast not too long ago, and they asked Will, they said, why the hell would you row across the ocean? And Will was like, oh, why not?
Right.
That's kind of where we're all at. It was like, give me a reason not to row it other than the sharks. You could, if you tell me like you're rowing it. And the huge part about this whole rowing stuff was part of the requirements for rowing is Fight or Die wants you to go out and they want you to spread the mental health awareness and get guys involved, because they also teach a mental health first aid course. And I've been through it. All the rowers have to go through it. And it is a 6-hour instruction on how to help someone in crisis. And there's a bunch of material to it. And I try to push as many people as I can. I think we've taught 800 people this year alone.
Wow.
With the mental health first aid class and it doesn't have to be military. It can be military. It can be civilian. It's anyone who wants to know how to deal with a crisis. And the big portion of the end is the self-care stuff, so their thing is, if you're going to come row for us, we want you to do some legwork, and the boat needs repairs. You got to do all this stuff. So in order to keep all this stuff going, there's kind of a price tag on what you need to raise.
Right.
And our goal was $100,000, and we could sell spots on the boat. We could do this and that. And I reached out to, and I got to give a shout out to Westford Automotive Group in Buffalo. Scott Beeler runs this place. I worked for the guy. I left, opened my own shop. I came back, worked for the guy. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, look, I know you do a lot of stuff for the community. I know you do a lot of stuff for the veteran community. Let me talk to you about this rowing team. And set up a meeting with him. I show up. The guy's got 2,000 employees. The first thing he says to me is, hey, man, I remember when you came back from Kuwait and came right back in the dealership. And I still owed you that coffee. And blew my mind that this guy knew who I was. We sat down. I talked to him. He's like, hey, I think I want to get behind this. We're going to set up another meeting. So I called the guys. I'm like, we're going to set up another meeting, ready to go. And we showed up for the second meeting. And there's a head from every single dealership he owns, which was 13 when I started, 26 when I went for the meeting. There's 30 some people in this meeting, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, you got people in the standing room. And I'm like, okay, I got Lori and Bryant from Fight or Die on the monitor. And he goes, okay, bitch this to me. And I pretty much let him have it. I mean, I worked for the guy. I respect the guy. The guy is a huge influence to the veteran community in Buffalo. And I talked to him and he's like, well, let me tell you something. He goes, what do you need from me? And, I've been asked that before with doing fundraisers and stuff like that for veterans mental health, but it's usually like, hey, man, we're trying to raise $1,000. So he's like, well, what do you need? And I said, well, here's where our sponsorship options are. And he goes, well, I can't be comfortable with half of it. And he's like, you came in here, you presented yourself. I know you. I know what you're about. I see the passion in your eyes for doing this. And he goes, you are crazy. But he's like, passion that you're gonna put yourself out there, and to see you come in here. He goes, you came here with the head of steam. He goes, obviously the guy has a lot of money. He owns a lot of businesses. And I walked in there like I knew him off the street, because I was like, you know what? I'm coming in there. I'm bringing my best self. I'm bringing you. He was asking me questions about the dealer and like, when you worked for me, how was this? I gave him straightforward answers. And he said, the way you present yourself and the way you approach me, he goes, we're going to cover the whole thing. Just within a first month of setting it up, completely blew my mind.
Right.
I left the meeting. He goes, I want to do something for you guys that makes you skip across the parking lot to your car. I left that meeting and called the guys and was like, hey, we have just raised enough money to take care of a scholarship for somebody at Denver University. Now, Denver University is one of our big partners because they do a mental health doctorates for people that deal with vets specifically, which is rare to find one that deals with primarily veterans. And by the fact that this guy stepped up, we were able to help get someone that, and who knows who they're gonna help.
Right.
Like I said, this is a crazy adventure for me. Wow. But the support we've gotten from the Buffalo community, from Westford, and from my family, from everybody around on my team, every one of our wives is absolutely insane and giving us mad support for it, and been like, hey,
For sure.
Like I was surprised because I knew when my wife said, "Hey, I'm behind you 100%." I was like, "Okay." Now I got to convince 3 other wives to be
Right.
okay with it. And every single one of them got the same answer. It was like Will's wife was like, "You know you're gonna do this, right?" He mentioned it to her, and she goes, "You know that you mentioned it, so you're gonna do it. So you know I'm behind you. Go ahead and do it."
Wow.
So I mean, to get 4 women on board and be like, "Hey, like," but they see the passion,
Yeah.
because just like you, man, it's you've been to the bottom. You have that chance to affect one person, 2 people. You're gonna do it
Yeah.
because these are brothers and sisters that we're rowing for.
Right.
And some of the big statistics that people probably will find very interesting, like I did, was that the when we row this, each rower is going to row about 1.5 million row strokes from the time we start until we finish. That alone is insane.
Yeah.
The big thing that I saw that stepped out to me was the more people have climbed Everest, more people have been to space and row this ocean. And I found 3 lunatics that want to jump in a boat and actually row it with me, which is insane. Like I said, it's just we're living in it, we're pushing it. I'm getting up 2 o'clock every morning. I'm pushing it to the max before I get to work. I am 100% all in with my workouts. My guys are all in. But they had this past year, they had the boats that crossed. They had 3 different boats that got hit with marlin strikes that actually punctured holes in their boat. And like I said,
Jesus.
that's 100% sustained. One of the teams actually had to flip their boat on its side, putty it over, hop back in, and keep rowing. So you don't know what you're going to face when you're out there.
That's crazy.
But the crazy thought is of being out in the middle of nowhere, relying on each other, just like the old times where we were out there running guns,
Yeah.
counting on your brother. We're out there, we're pushing ourselves to the max. We've been told by every rower we've talked to that after 7 days, your body is beat and your mind is beat.
Hmm.
And I honestly don't think even military or even when I was at my lowest, I don't think I've ever pushed myself to that point
No.
of being physically and mentally broken to that point.
Right.
So that's going to take a lot out of me to push myself to that point. And everyone keeps saying, like, when you think about being physically and mentally broken, like, where are you going to be? You're going to be physically and mentally broken because your race starts on the 12th of December. You're going to be physically and mentally broken before Christmas. You're going to have a sat phone where you can call home on Christmas, but you're going to be broken.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think about it, and I just keep. You would think that I get nervous, but I get more excited whenever I think about the row. Every time I talk to people about the row,
Yeah.
I get excited because I'm out there getting these guys in with groups to talk to,
Right.
mental health coaches to get out there. I'm having guys call me saying, "Hey man, I'm having a rough day. What do I do?" And I'll say, "Hey man, I learned this in this class and it's read this in this book. I got some buddies that I can reach out to." And, now we got that intertwined group of support, just like you've got with some of your guys. You found over time that you find these groups that have the same mission. We're all on the same path of taking that number, that 22 a day number that we all know. If you look at statistics, it's up in the 30s. We know it's not 22 a day anymore. We know it's way higher, but that number is just, it eats at you. And we'll all intertwine as much as we can to make sure that if I don't have the resources, Dylan, I'm sending them to you. If I know you have the resources, we work together.
Right.
So I just found a little bit crazier avenue of going about it than
Certainly.
most. So
Certainly. And I don't think crazy is a bad thing sometimes. I
I
think,
don't either. I really don't.
especially, you know, I mean, even when I look at what I do, even with what I've done in the last 18 months, like this was crazy to me.
Right.
This was my own version of crazy because I'm an introvert, right? Like I don't want to talk to people. Like it's not a normal thing for me in my life. Like this eloquence that people see now of my ability to speak to people and talk to people, like this is only really built in the last 5 years. I,
It's
I didn't
crazy. It's
I
crazy
didn't
that you'll take, man,
yeah.
because I'm a very outgoing person. Like I will talk to anybody, anywhere. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, but then the one thing I choose to do is row a boat with a bunch of guys that don't want to sit with my ADHD ass for hours. And I told them, like, if you don't want to talk to me, then row faster. We'll get there quicker. And you want to see me go out.
Right.
But it's crazy because I would never picture you as an introvert kind of
Oh,
guy.
very much. I am the introvert of introverts. I don't know if you ever did the 16 personalities test, but I'm an
Yeah.
INFJ, and that's
Oh,
like the rarest.
that's all the way in there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I've always been that. Like I remember taking that test back in like 2010 or something like that, and then I took it like last year, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm so very closed off in many aspects. Like I will knowingly and willingly go on TikTok and talk to people, right? I'll go on a live session, I'll make a video, I'll do that stuff, but then I'll go out to the grocery store and I'll be like, don't fucking talk to me. Right? Like that's how I am. Like I go out in public and I do not want to talk to people. And
Yeah.
it's just who I am. Like I really value my space. And it's always been that way. But I
Yeah.
also recognize what I need, right? And one of the things that I need is to show people a different path forward, right? Like that's why this is all crazy to me. Like the past 18 months, stepping into jumping on TikTok was like, Dylan, you know who you are. Like this
Yep.
is not going to be comfortable. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Like it's just like you just have to do what you have to do. And I stepped out. I've been writing the book for the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Um, and doing all of this stuff has, you see who I am now. Like I have
Hmm.
the ability to step out, be social, be open,
Right.
you know, uh, be this person that people come to. But I'm never really that comfortable being the life of the party, or being that person that people like. If I was out on the street and people noticed me, I wouldn't know what to do. Like I hate small talk. I don't really know what to talk about. I
Right.
If you want to have a conversation with me, you're pretty likely to go pretty fucking deep right away. Like
Yeah.
I don't like wasting time, and it's gonna go, how are you? And I actually care about the answer, so I'm gonna make sure you give it to me, right? So if you
Right.
give me fine, I'm gonna be like, what does that mean? And it like people just know that I'm going deep right away, like
Right.
whether you know me or not. So no, I completely understand the necessity for crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
You know,
man,
is in your chapter 2 of your book, because obviously your book came out what, like 2 days ago, and I've already got it and I'm reading it, and I'm telling you, to anyone that listens to this, the book is unbelievable. One, but you put something in chapter 2 that has been like my motto for the last like few years, and what we've been talking about is being uncomfortable, or being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
yeah.
Like I can tell you right now, this rowing across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat at 33 years old is my way of being comfortable being uncomfortable. We were actually not slotted to go. We applied for the 23 slot,
Yeah.
and you know, right after it kicked off, we lost like 3 different guys in our career field to suicide. And then the team in front of us, the 22 team, fell off while I was on vacation at a water park with my family. And my wife's in there feeding the kids, and I'm like, hey, I got to take a phone call. Like I look at this and I see the 22 team dropped, and I called my guys and I said, hey, we did a video chat right away. I said, guys, there's no 22 team. How cool would that be to row across the Atlantic Ocean in the 22nd year?
Wow.
I was like, what are the chances of us being able to do that? And they were like, dude, we're on board. I said, you do realize that we're cutting this short. I got a hold of Fight or Die. I got a hold of Brian. He's like, I think they thought we were joking, because they're like, you do realize how much prep goes into this, right? And I'm like, no, we don't. Like we honestly haven't done any of the training prep stuff. Right now it's physical prep. It's a lot of setting up stuff. I mean, we're gonna have thousands of dollars worth of gear that we have to order and everything.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we are going to be mentally and physically prepared for this. And he's like, well, let's talk to the board. And when we talked to the board, that was one of the things we brought up. We were all like, hey, you know, what's the difference of a year? We can train, we can be mentally prepared or physically prepared, mentally prepared. I don't think any of us can say that we're going to be mentally prepared because none of us really know what it entails.
Right.
You know, you're not going to know. Like, you could have a calm year, you could have a marlin strike on your boat. You could be sitting out there for 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And ocean sickness is a big deal with these teams. Like, the sea sickness is not a normal sea sickness. It's not a motion sickness. These guys are down and out for a week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there could be a number of things that happen on this boat that
Right.
we're not expecting, or it can happen at times we don't expect it, or it could happen and 7 days in, mentally, we're not ready to handle this stuff yet.
Yeah.
So I said, no, we're not mentally prepared. We will push ourselves to get to that point. But we are comfortable with being uncomfortable, and this is uncomfortable shit. And if we can take the 22nd year, we guarantee you we're going to make you proud on this. And the big thing he asked me was like, when we first applied for it, was like, what was it that made you want to row this ocean? That's the one thing they want to know. I said, dude, I watched these videos of these guys rowing. I watched the very end of the video. I watched these guys pop this flare. And they pop their flare right when they come in the harbor. And I see the look on these guys' faces. I got to know what that feels like. Like, I have to know what it feels like to be like, hey, I did this, and to know I did it for veterans all over the world. I got to know what that feels like. I can't watch some dude pop a flare after rowing 3,000 miles and see the look in his eye and know he saw something. Like, he experienced something that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I'm watching this guy do it, and I'm like, I got to know what that feels like. And when it comes down to where I'm at, like, my family's behind me. I'm looking at jobs and stuff like that. I'm like, you know, where will I be with my career at that time? You know, and it's like, I don't know, man. I got to know what this feels like.
Yeah.
Like, my focus is on this row. Like, I have power focus to do this with my guys. But it's like you said in your book, man, it's being uncomfortable. It's being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's a hard place to be.
Yeah.
But you're obviously there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you do a lot of stuff that you're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, I was reading your book and I was like, man, the dude comes out and lays it hard.
I do.
And he comes out and lays it hard. And within the first like couple minutes, I got my kids asking me for snacks. I'm like, nah, you're waiting till this chapter's over, because he is putting himself out there, and being vulnerable is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly where you need to be to show people sometimes.
Yeah.
To take that step forward. And man, you came hard with that book. I am chapter 3 right now, and I am chomping the bits to get back at it. So
it's, you know, one of the big things that I learned with this book is vulnerability is a special kind of courage. And when you step into vulnerability, and when you step into that courage and you start giving that, and you start understanding what you're actually giving, courage becomes a necessity. And,
right.
And vulnerability then also becomes a necessity. And it's not necessarily for other people, right? Like, your vulnerability, and I think you'll start to understand this as you get further into the book, but that vulnerability is never about other people. It's never
right.
about like what they're going to judge you for, or what they're going to say to you, right? It's this idea of being able to actually understand what you are saying. And if it's judged, whatever, like, take it for what it is. But the idea is that when you give something, when you share something, you actually start to pay attention to what you're sharing. And if you don't like it, what you actually start to do is understand, I want to change what that narrative actually looks like. I want to change what that story actually feels like. Right. And that's one of the biggest things with trauma and with mental health issues, is that you're telling your story and you're not happy with what you're telling. So fucking change it.
Right. Like I said, when I dove into chapter 2, I was expecting, I remember I talked to you and you're like, hey, you got to hit chapter 2 and you might want to reread it. And you even put that in there like 3 times, like, reread this. Dude, I was expecting like a point in there to jump out at me. I was expecting like I was already prepped for it, you know, and there was every single page, there was a different point to it that I could relate to.
Yeah.
Like, there was the comfortable with uncomfortable. I mean, that jumped out and I was like, damn, like that's where I came to.
Mhm.
Like I was in a comfortable place and I tried to stay as comfortable as possible
Yeah.
and I was getting nowhere. I was finding myself doing the same thing. And then when you talked about the triad of, of dealing with problems,
Yep.
like there's a lot of power in everything you put in there. But like I said, it's like you turn the page and I'm like everything I could relate to, like with solving the problem to where I know over time, my big thing was problems arose. Like back in the day when I tried to blame everyone else in 2009, when I was in that point, I blamed everybody else
Yep.
for my mental state and how I was there. And self-reflection brought me back. And reading the book, reading that chapter, I'm sitting here thinking, man, it took me almost 8 years to get to that point to where I realized, and people started saying, yeah, remember back in 2009, we were in Balad. Like, you don't talk about that much.
Yeah.
And like it'd been asked before, it's like, you don't talk about that much. And I'm like, no, I don't talk about that because that was hell in my mind.
It's terrible.
But the thing was, for 8 years, every time it came up and I actually talked about it, I blamed other people for where I was at.
Yeah.
And I didn't take responsibility for, hey, there's choices you made that were poor choices. You knew they were poor choices, but you still blamed other people. And when I finally got to that point of realizing, like, hey, this is where I was making choices, and like I came out and said, hey, 2009 was a wash for me. 2009, 2010 was a wash for me, and I almost lost. I threw it all in. I almost lost on poor choices that I made, but it was my fault. It's my job to fix it. When I came to that conclusion and actually started admitting out loud that, like, yeah, Balad was a shit sandwich and it was my fault and I made some mistakes.
Yeah.
The weight was just gone. Like I felt like I actually came to terms with myself. And then I would start looking at, where you're talking about like the problem solving. My thing was I'd get stuck in stage one and
Yeah.
I would never even get to the point of, or my anxiety and my ADHD, I would be looking so far ahead, like,
Yeah.
this is what's going to happen. This is what could happen, that I would overthink it.
Yep.
And I would find myself reacting to what I was expecting to happen
Right.
before it happened. And all these things kind of trickled back when I was reading your book today of like, these are all the different things and all the different reasons and all the different struggles that I went through on top of it that brought me back to center me to where I am now, to where I've learned all this stuff over time. I'm looking at going, man, that was 2009. And here I am in 2021 reading this book going, man, this would have been helpful. Like, I don't know, 10 years ago to like settle myself in, not get to those points. But,
I know.
it took me that long to settle in. And I love what you're doing with it. I love the fact you throw it out there. And like I said, if I could sit down and read this chapter, just chapter 2 over again, I'm probably going to get 10 more different things that reflect in myself. And I know you're telling your story, but I'm reading it and it's hammering me so hard that I'm like, man, I'm page 57, 58 is into chapter 2. I can tell you right now, because that's the page I grabbed the highlighter and said, I got to go back and start reading it again because I need to have something sitting here so I could look at. But all this stuff that centered me that I'm realizing now from looking at this book and what centered me is what puts me in the same position I want to row. Like I'm finding myself going, let's not overthink this.
Yeah.
Like, this is why we're doing it. We have so much support behind us to row this ocean. We're going to row it.
Yeah.
And people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, he's insane. And they had to sell it to people. They told people on base. I mean, for the first couple of months of people finding out that I worked with, I brought it up. My coworkers were, okay, like, you're insane. And then it was like, who wants to do it with me? And it was like, nobody. For months until I found my team. These guys were like, no. And then I could come into work one day and I'm smiling. And they're like, well, he's still talking about that rowing stuff. He's not letting it go. Like, he's just like, they're going to drug test you and they're going to send you off to get evaluated. And I'm like, well, you know what? I got a team now. And they kept asking me, but it's like people on base would be like, hey, here it is a Saturday morning. I'm bringing a rowing machine back to the gym that I borrowed over the weekend at work. And I'm like, sorry, man, I'm just training for an ocean row. And they're like, all right, well, you shouldn't be borrowing that for the whole weekend. Like, guys might need it. I'm like, I'm sorry, man, I'm training for an ocean. And then I start talking to them. They're like, the first thing out of their mouth is like, why the hell would you do it?
Yeah.
Like, why the hell not? If you see what we're doing it for, like, I got to.
Yeah.
Like, like, just like, I'm sure you sat down and you looked over your stuff of like, started writing this book and you started putting stuff on paper and you probably thought a few times of like, what the hell am I thinking? But you knew you
I
had to.
I think I think realistically what came to mind, because I think this purpose was like an eternal fire for me, right?
Yeah.
I think the only thing that made me question it was how people were going to look at the the outcome, right?
Yeah.
Like, and was it? I always kind of struggled in the beginning, because that was still, 2016 was still a moment for me that I was trying to
Right.
work through my own issues still. Um, was it going to be good enough? That's always been that's always been my biggest insecurity,
Right.
because I lost my father, right? Like, and
Right.
I always brought it back to I wasn't good enough, right?
Yeah.
And you know, but I am the kind of person that when I am dedicated to what I really want, and what I
Mm.
really wanted was to put out a book, or it's not even really about the book. It's about I wanted to give people what I didn't have, right?
Right.
And
That's
what people find in me is someone that, like, I literally dive into them to understand them. People
right.
don't have that. Like, I never had that. I had people that supported me, and I
Mhm.
love and respect them and I appreciate
Yeah.
them, but they didn't have the ability to look at me
Right.
for who I really was, and what I was really struggling with. Like, I quite frankly, I think I know why I'm an introvert. I know why I'm so deeply introverted is because
Mhm.
I walk around and I look at people, I'm not looking at their faces. I'm looking at who they are. And I already
Right.
know when people are suffering. Right? Like, I'm the kind of person that I can drive down the road and I
Yeah.
can look in the next car over and I know that person's suffering. I don't know how. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I see people on the street sometimes and I'm like, man, I'm sorry, for whatever it is that you're struggling with. I'm sorry, because I just know that stuff, and sometimes I'm like, just leave me alone.
Yep.
I don't want to deal with this today, because it's a lot. Like, it's a heavy thing to carry sometimes, to
Yeah.
know
Oh,
everything
I
is,
can imagine.
yeah, that everything is a struggle for people. And like, I have to create those boundaries myself and say, like, hey, I can't do it today. I can't be
Right.
that person for everybody today. And I've always tried to show people the best example of being a good person. I've
Hmm.
failed at that. Absolutely. I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. I've done the wrong thing, but I don't look at those anymore. Right? I used to, because it was always a justification for why I'm not good enough. But
Right.
that's the problem, is that you're looking for the justification of the wrong thing. And I learned that about myself, and I started recognizing that I need to justify moving forward, not moving backward. And when I started really looking at that, I started paying attention to how I was actually thinking. I was like, it doesn't matter what I've done, right? It does to some people, and that's their fucking problem. And I can apologize all I want to them, and I wish I didn't do it, and I can say that to them all day long, but they're not going to give a fuck. They're going to hold on to
Right.
it. If they're going to be bitter, they're not going to like me, right? People are going to judge me. It is what it is. But I
Yeah.
can move forward and I can give people something, right? It's the same thing you're doing. You're giving people hope. You're giving people,
Right.
like, I can fucking do this, which means that you can do it. And
Right.
it's the same thing I'm doing. I can do this. I can step out of my comfort zone and be this person for people. I can dive into them, and sometimes I had a client, one of my first clients. She she's talking to me and she's like, this is our first session. She's like, in 26 years of therapy, I've never gone this deep with someone. And
Right.
you're I can't remember what she said. She was like, you're a wrecking ball of perspective. And I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. Like, that's because I look at things differently, because I've had to, right?
Right.
If I didn't look at things differently, I wouldn't be here, right? We wouldn't be having this conversation. I
Right.
wouldn't have, almost 500,000 followers and millions of views and all of a book, right? I wouldn't have this stuff for people that have been impacted by me because I didn't look at things differently. I
It's
had to.
crazy how the perspective is, how your perspective comes, especially for you and me. I mean, I would go and say that we are completely opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to like the beginning of our life and how we got to that military point. I mean, I've read part of your story, and I'm looking forward to getting into the rest of it and stuff like that. But I grew up with two parents who were pastors. I was the kid that played guitar for the praise and worship team growing up. I was quiet and shy, and I was like that until I left for the military. I started playing ball. I started playing high school ball. Then I kind of just let myself go. I was a heavy, overweight kid, could hit a baseball, but I was quiet everywhere else.
Mm,
And it was just, but I had like deep all American family kind of thing.
yep.
I had the mom and dad that were happily married, but pastors, and I had an older brother, younger brother who were. My older brother was super big into business and cars and stuff like that, and he's working out in California making stupid money. And my younger brother had the dream of following my footsteps in the military when I left and being a trooper. He's actually a state trooper now, and so completely different lives.
Yep.
Like compared to what your story is and compared to my story. But when it comes back to perspective of knowing that you grew up that way, I grew up this way, and here we are living separate lives and both finding ourselves in low points and being able to dig ourselves out because we found a perspective and we found people who were there to help us find that perspective.
Yep.
And here we are on a podcast. You're telling me about a book you just wrote and 500,000 people following you because you're a mental health coach now.
Yep.
And you are making a huge difference. And I'm rowing an ocean.
Yep.
And we're here on a podcast, completely separate. But like you said, and it's in your book too. I keep referencing your book because there's so much valuable stuff in that it's just where you talk about, not all people relate to things the same way.
Right.
I had guys that ran convoys with me that were so messed up when they got back that they got out.
Yep.
Then I have guys that like you'd see them smiling or you would see them like serious face all the time and they come home there and it didn't even phase them. Like everyone was affected by the exact same incident, just different ways.
Yeah.
And it's like you and me both grew up completely different experiences, finding ourselves in similar positions where it comes to like pushing for vets. But we both have found our avenue of ways of doing it.
Yeah.
But if I were to go through the same thing you went through, dude, I guarantee you my perspective is totally different. And that's just crazy the way it was broken down with the 40 bits per minute.
Yeah.
And how your mind processes it. Like,
Yeah.
dude, stuff like that is absolutely mind blowing to me. I read it like 12 times because I was like, no, man, I'm misreading this. And I'm like, dude, I gotta do some research on this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, dude, your book is powerful. That's all I gotta say. Like you took it to a level that I've read a ton of books. One, it's hard for me to read a book being ADHD. I am all over the place. I start reading stuff. I end up on separate pages, or I end up cleaning a bedroom when I'm supposed to be reading a book. So I should probably be doing homework right now for my nursing degree, but here I am. I'm like sidetracked halfway through it. But your book is one of those books that I picked up, and I'm almost 100 pages in, almost halfway through the book in a day.
That's crazy.
Because I'm finding so much that over my whole years of military service in my life, even though we are completely different people and we have done completely separate things, not even close. First time we've ever talked on the phone was what, today?
Yeah.
And every single page on that book is like jumping on me going, holy shit. Like I feel like this dude roomed with me like this whole time. And he's like writing a bio about like how I respond to stuff and like,
Yeah.
but it's the way you break things down. Like, I don't know how you were able to break it down that way. Me, my word choice, and everyone knows on the boat that I'm like the grammar guy that likes to correct everyone's grammar. And I'm reading words in your book that I'm like, let me go check the dictionary just to make sure I'm reading this right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the way you wrote that book was there, dude, my hat's off. It is incredible.
I appreciate it. I
You're gonna change the world with that book, man. You really
it's
will.
it's not going to be the last one.
No,
You know, I've
I hope.
already I've already, you know, like for all my hardcore fans that follow my podcast, um, I've got like 6 planned. I've got
Yeah,
I've got kind of more or less really general outlines of the books that I want to really write. You know,
I
I
wrote
want
a
to.
poem once. That's about as far as
Oh
writing as
yeah.
I.
Well, I think after this experience of rowing a boat 3,000 miles, you might want to think about writing a book.
Well, you know what? The Will Jansen, who's our engineer, his dad. We went up to Minnesota and had a team kind of get together at a little local bar in Wisconsin, where his family's from.
Yeah.
His dad bought us these leather-bound books that we can keep journals on the boat. And I
Oh yeah.
promise you, when I'm done, I'm going to be writing in that thing because I'm going to be rowing 12 hours a day. But the rest of the time, when I'm trying not sleeping and eating MRE style food,
Yeah.
you know, because I'm going to be sitting down writing, and I'm going to be writing everything I can in that book. And I was with my son today when we were out getting some stuff, and I was like, I saw one that looked kind of like it, and I told him, I said, my son's 8, by the way, so we're sitting there, we're walking through the store, we're grabbing the stuff. They didn't have a webcam for this computer, so I went to grab it, and we're sitting there looking at this book, and he's like, "Hey, that looks like the book you got." And I said, he goes, "What are you going to use that book for?" I said, I'm going to start writing in that once we leave. And 5 years from the time I row, I'm going to look back at that book and I'm going to reread that over and over. I said, and I want to see the progression of how I change, and see where I'm at of like, because we know, the four of us know that something happens out there.
Yep.
We know that the whales and the dolphins and the stars at night are going to be unbelievable.
Yep.
And the physical, mental exhaustion, it's got to push us to places that we've never been. And it's going to completely change who we are.
Right.
How? Who knows? We'll figure it out. But, you know, sky's the limit when it comes to that.
Absolutely.
Just gonna, every time I get to that point where I'm writing in this little book and I'm thinking about what I'm doing, I'm gonna be trying to remember these conversations that we had with with people and veterans when they're like, "Hey man, if you inspire me when you row in this ocean." Like people tell me all the time, like, "Dude, you're an inspiration," and I'm like, "Dude, I ain't even gotten in a boat yet. Like I just told you I'm getting in a boat."
Yep.
And they're like, the fact that you found a team of 3 other guys that said, "Hey, the number is too high." You're watching vets take their own lives at numbers that are absolutely astonishing. And the guys that I see on TikTok since we got on, like I logged on TikTok as kind of like a joke, but those numbers are like, you see those numbers, and then we're going to look at it, and all four of us are in the same boat. This is why we're doing this and why we're out there. I'm going to be writing this whole journal, and I'm going to be thinking about why I'm doing this.
Yep.
But the TikTok thing, when I got on there and saw like Mill Talk and all these other guys, I ran into you on there, and I'm like,
Yep.
holy shit! Like these guys took this social media app and they used it to better people.
Yep.
And then I started seeing the vets on there that were posting like stuff, like the negative stuff, the dark stuff,
Right.
and that's a lot. Like you see it and you're not affected by it. I don't know what to tell you. Like if you can come across some of these people's posts, and I know that you probably reach out to people on there that you see their posts are just dark.
Yep.
And
I get tagged in them every once in a while.
yeah, I started getting tagged in them too. I got a few guys that tag me in them, and the amount of times I get tagged a week is just sad.
It's it's difficult because with what I do, I'm a mental health coach, right? That's my focus is I've built a platform, I've built a community where people come find me, right?
Right.
I think at the right time in their life. And here's the hard thing that I struggle with is that when people tag me in a video like that, these guys aren't ready, right?
Right.
Well, I can reach out and I can give them, but one, they don't know me, they don't understand me, right?
Right.
And I can give them all the tools. I can give anyone the tools to help themselves, right? All the tools I used are on that shelf right there, right? They're
Right.
books, right? I dove into books, I dove into podcasts and YouTube, and people. Like I'm different. Like I don't want to go talk to people, right? I didn't do therapy to get myself better. I
Right.
created my own perspective by taking from other people and building my own. And when I became comfortable enough, I began to speak about it, and I'd get feedback on that. Right?
Hmm.
That was my process. But you can't change people. Right? It's the first thing I say. If you ever do a consultation with me to do my mental health coaching, one of the first things I say to you, I can't change you. I can't fix you.
Right.
I can't save you. I can't make you do anything that you don't want to do. And if you don't want to live, there's nothing I can do about that.
Hmm.
Right? I can give you the stories, I can give you the books, I can give you all the resources you want. But if you want to die, you want to die.
Right.
And like the that's a harsh reality for a lot of people that follow me, because a lot of people that follow me are very, very empathic, right?
Right.
High amounts of empathy. They care very much. They're healers. They're people that want to help people. But the hard facts are hard facts, right?
Right.
You can't save people's lives that don't want to be saved, right? I
Yeah.
learned that. You've read the part of the book that really gets to it.
Right.
I learned
So
that from my
you
father.
can't change me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got to, it's got to start with me.
yeah,
When
and
I saw that in the book, and I was like, yeah, I've been there where you know, I've had people reach out, and I talked to one dude for like 2 or 3 days, and it was like he was not ready. It was not in that place where he wanted to change.
yeah,
Young kid, and it was almost more for me. It more took away from me. For me, I was pouring so much into it at first
yeah,
that I found myself on day three like so burnt out
yep.
and realizing that. And I even told him, I'm like, dude, you need professional help. Like, I'm not, I can listen to you all day long, but you need to see a professional. And he kept saying, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm like, well, we're still there. So you're not ready to change.
But think
When
about
you're
it.
ready to change, get it.
What will a professional do that you who are probably more qualified to relate to him,
Hmm.
what will a professional do?
Well, the reason I told him to find a professional was because I knew at that point in time of talking to him that he pretty much kept saying, I can handle this myself. I can handle this myself. And I'm like, look, when you're ready, you go. I said, go talk to a professional. Because when you go talk to a professional, that's when you're telling yourself, if you make that call, you're ready.
Yeah.
You're not, if you're not ready, you're not going to make that call.
One of the big problems I see, right? And I fully respect the mental health industry in
Hmm.
many ways, but I also see glaring issues, right? And I'm going to highlight the VA, and I'm also going to highlight emergency services and how they respond to mental health, right? What I see is that people in crisis are then often supported through medication rather than supported through like the perspective process, and
Right.
and helped through, like you were helped through. Someone
Hmm.
sat with you, right? I almost I want to pull this up, right? I had a person text me or drop me a story today, about what she went through, and I want to read this to her, to the podcast. Um, so last Tuesday, I transported a Marine that was having hallucinations of a 13-year-old he shot in Syria to a hospital that I thought was going to help him. I may have only been with him for 15 minutes, but the last thing he said to me was, "Man, I'd love to go back to Syria." Friday, I called his time of death after allotted resuscitations efforts failed. Knowing that he was dead the second I touched him in the alley behind his house, where his body was left for hours while state police investigated because he was shot multiple times by police. I have yet to be interviewed by them, so I'm still carrying him with me. The 15 minutes I just sat and listened to, the one thing he told me that stuck out was he was just given pills and told he needs to get over it, and therapy didn't work. Like that's a reality. Like
Right.
there's a stigma in this country, not just for veterans, but this is for all people, right? I deal with all
Oh,
people.
yeah.
Like
Hmm.
there's a massive stigma in this country about mental health care,
Hmm.
and people within mental health care, right? And not, I shouldn't say just mental health care, but emergency care,
Right.
don't realize their impacts, how they impact and influence people with mental health issues. And now,
Right.
certainly, people with mental health issues obviously don't understand how they're impacting others, and it's a very difficult kind of vicious cycle that we're dealing with.
Right.
But if you give someone medication and then tell them to get over it, that's not a solution to a problem.
Right. There's no follow up with it.
Right.
That's like, I know we haven't really talked too much. My wife's actually a mental health nurse practitioner,
Yeah.
and she sees it all the time. It's patients coming in that their big thing is like, hey, like I'm here. Let me tell you what you need to hear so you can give me medication.
Yeah.
And her big thing has always been the less you need, the better. And
Right.
she gets people from all over the place that come to her as an initial, and she's like looking at, holy cow, like
Yeah.
she'll tell me all the time, like I feel like I'm working backwards
Right.
from sometimes when I get people. Yeah, sometimes you're working backwards of you get someone that's been on everything, and now you're like, you do not like you can't be on this. Like you don't, this isn't what you need. Like
And
the
my
follow up process is like huge of
right.
like if you're going to go that route and someone doesn't, they feel they need to take something, you need to have a follow up process. When you give someone something, you say, hey, here you go, deal with it.
Right.
Like what kind of process? Like
Right.
that's an old military term for here's some Motrin and some water, your back doesn't hurt you, and then you
Right.
get out 6 years later, and what are we doing? We're getting back surgery, we're getting
Right.
shoulder surgery for something we got water and Motrin for years. It's the same
Yep.
concept.
And it's difficult, right? Obviously, mental health is such a difficult topic to really discuss and break down, and you
Right.
know what it requires is time. It requires people to spend time with people and support
Right.
people. But you're right, like you can't just give people these medications and expect them to be okay, right? Like
Yeah.
I I see clients all the time that have come to me, right? I'm not a professional, right? Like I
Right.
have no mental health background in education or anything like that. I'm experienced, right? I'm
Mhm.
100% experienced. I'm self-taught. I have learned all of this stuff on my own. I just know how to help people, right?
Right.
And I don't pretend to be any kind of mental health professional. But people come to me because they've had terrible experience with therapists, terrible
Right.
experience with medications that were given to them and told like this is going to help you. This is going to be the thing.
Right. It's not the cure all.
And
That's the big thing that a lot of people like the old school mentality of like, we're gonna give you something and this is gonna fix you. It doesn't fix you.
no.
None of
Nope.
that stuff ever fixes you. It's a chemical to help balance you out, but it's not a permanent solution. And
Exactly.
people that use it as a permanent solution, you don't realize the damage you're doing to these people. And then eventually they get to that point in life where they're like, it's back in balance.
Yep.
Like your body adjusts this stuff after a while. And if you're not following up with them, you're not giving them a solution. You can't give someone some pills to get over it. It's
Yep.
just, it's upsetting that there's still people out there that do that. Like there's been the stigma for mental health for years. And I think it's getting better with people like you that go out there and, tell it for what it is.
Right.
There's people coming into the profession now that actually are in the profession because they care. My
Yep.
wife's a huge one that I've never, I mean, mind you, it's one, because she's my wife. Everyone's going to say good things about their wife, obviously, and being on podcasts and stuff. My wife is probably the most caring person when it comes to dealing with people.
Yeah.
And I see the way she deals with her own family prior to us, getting married and stuff like that. My wife is being a former vet as well. When she goes out there to talk to people, she gives a shit.
Yeah.
And she's dealt with people in the past that she's, worked beside years and years ago where she was trying to go through schooling. And she was like, don't want to be like them.
Right.
And it was like, you could tell that it was all about the money. Yeah, they make good money when they deal with mental health patients. But you know what? What is the purpose?
Right.
You're going to destroy someone's life for a paycheck. It's not worth it.
Right.
And to see her work and actually care.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when I linked up with you online and I saw some of the stuff you were doing, I was like, this dude fucking gets it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he cares. Like when she does it, that's part of the reason why I'm going through my nursing program now, is because I'm going for my nurse practitioner mental health as well.
That's awesome.
And it's because I care.
Yep.
Like you don't row across an ocean
because you don't
just for shit
care.
and giggles. Like, I've never pitched it as that to anyone. When I talk to people, like trying to say, hey, get behind us. It's not about get behind us because see what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm rowing a boat because I care.
Yep.
Do I think that someone with ADHD should be stuck in a boat for 50 days with 3 other people tormenting the shit out of them? Absolutely not. I think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Have I seen Jaws? Absolutely. I think it's a terrible idea. But at the same time, like, you're talking, people are going to, like, I tell people, they're like, well, what if couldn't you find another way? And I'm like, no, somebody's got to do this. It's going to be me. Like, and I was asked, when it comes to like work and like what I'm going to do with stuff like that, and people say, why don't you just wait? And I'm like, wait for what? I have an entire organization behind me,
Mm-hmm.
financially saying, we're not veterans, but we want to help veterans. So what are we going to do? We're going to take that money out of the game and not help vets. We're going to take my time and helping vets out of the game and push it back for a few years. How many people are going to lose their lives in between that time and then? That's not something I want to even think about.
Yeah.
Like, my thinking is this needs to be done now. If I could row it this year, I would.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I could go and find something to do other than running, as long as it's not running, I'm for it. If you ask me to do a marathon, I might tell you to do something else.
I completely
I
agree.
But yeah,
Sure.
but yeah, when it comes to mental health, but like you said, though, I mean, it's because people care. That's where you're going to get it, is where people care. And I think we're starting to get past that stigma with some people, but you're always going to have it. And it's those people that, unfortunately, that people with mental health issues go to,
Right.
and they find those people that don't care.
Yep.
They don't realize that you may have taken a 10-year trauma and turned it into a 20-year problem.
Right.
Or you may have pushed it to the point of where that person is not want to reach out for help.
That is probably, man, that is probably one of the most profound statements that I've probably heard on the podcast so far. Is you've probably taken a 10-year trauma and made it a 20-year problem. That's incredible. I mean,
It's
it's
and
true.
the thing is, it's true. Like,
Yeah.
I've known guys in the military that have told me I will not see a counselor.
Yeah.
And it's funny when guys call me up and they're like, hey man, I'm dealing with something. I've been dealing with this for a while. I don't want to see anybody. And I'm sitting here with my wife 10 feet away from me, who's a mental health, provider. And I'm like, you should see someone. They're like, no, man, I've seen someone. Like, I'm not going to be one of those guys just get to shove pills.
Yeah.
And here I am talking to them, like I said, with my wife 10 feet away from me, who's a provider. And I'm like, you have this whole stigma on, this is what the mental health profession is. And it's because you found someone who didn't give a shit.
Yep.
And now that tainted one of your options for help. And it's upsetting, especially when it's someone that calls me and I got to be like, hey, like, I know who you saw. Like, I don't know personally who you saw, but I know what kind of person you saw.
Right.
And I'm sharing a house with someone who's the complete opposite,
Yeah.
who gives a shit and goes out every day. And when she comes home, exhausted, completely exhausted, but completely satisfied at knowing that she is actually making a difference.
Right.
That it's huge. So yeah, you don't want to, you find those people, man, like I said, and completely out of the blue, but you find those people that have 10-year problems.
Yep.
Or 10-year traumas that turn into 20-year problems over people that don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Absolutely. I mean,
We'll get them there though. That's why we keep pushing.
Absolutely. I don't know if I say it in the book, but I do say it occasionally, is like, I'm trying to solve a problem that will probably never be solved, right? Because society can never be ideal, right? I love the quote from Fury: "Ideals are peaceful, history is violent."
Right.
Like, we're the most violent, like, species on the planet. Like, we kill billions of things just to eat them every day for billions of people, right? Like, we are the most violent thing on the planet, right? It's not sharks, it's not tigers. Like, we kill things, we kill everything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, like, I was listening to a TikTok about, like, vegans, and like the amount of what it takes to like grow, I think it was like 40 acres of avocados. They have to kill like 20,000 chipmunks every year just to grow 40 acres of avocados. So like you're not like, just because you're vegan doesn't mean you're not having things killed for you to be vegan. Like
Right.
it's remarkable to that people think that not killing things is possible. Like
Yeah.
that's who we are. Like it's part of our nature, and we have to start. I'm a realist, that we have to start understanding who we really are.
Right.
And I think, if we're really going down the avenue of mental health, we have to understand from two perspectives, right? Like, one, if you're a person struggling with your mental health, that there are people out there that don't care. That's a reality. And yet at the same time, two things can be true, right? There are people out there that do care. And
Right.
it's really up to you to go search for and find and really dive into the people that do care rather than the people that don't.
Right.
And then on the other side of the coin is that providers, right? Mental health coaches, therapists, mental health nurses, all of them, all of us, right? Because I'm part of them. We have to understand that there are people that are ready and there are people that are not. And
Right.
we also have to respect and understand the people that are not, and we have to give them, like, what my foundation of is, within my mental health coaching, my foundation is respect and dignity, right? If you come to me, I don't care if you don't think I'm helping, that's fine. I will always treat you with respect and dignity, because that's probably something that caused some of the problems that you brought me, right? And if I'm not the one that can help you, I understand that. That's fair. That's for you to decide, though, not me, because what I've learned is that I can ask the question, right? After a session of like what I think is not helping, I can ask the question and say, did this help you? And sometimes they'll say yes. And I'm completely baffled, because I feel like I at times didn't provide any value.
Right.
Sometimes it's just being there. That's value. Sometimes it's just hearing me talk is value. Or sometimes it's just sitting with someone is value. And
you know what I found with when it comes to when you find a good person. I've been through counseling, and I'll be the first one to tell people that I've gone to the vet centers.
Yeah.
I've been to counseling, and a lot of people don't want to come out and say that.
Yeah.
I will be the first one telling my guys. And I had a conversation with someone I served with prior, and I was like, hey man, I've been to this place, and I felt better. Will you feel better? I don't know.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you that this is the avenue to go. Had I not been in that vulnerable state of saying, hey, this is me on with my heart on my sleeve.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you that I've talked to people. A lot of people don't like to say, like, I get it. I'm not like, a lot of people don't like to be like, hey, I see a counselor. But when you see someone struggling, sometimes you got to be that guy saying, hey, you might need to see someone. You might need to talk to someone if you're ready. But you know what? I can give you a recommendation of someone who helped me. Can't promise they're going to help you, but let me tell you, this is a good avenue to go.
Right.
So, and sometimes when I say it, I'm like, I may not have added any value by giving them the information on me. They may have been like, hey, well, I've seen you off before. Yep. So, obviously they didn't do that much good. So sometimes I feel like I'm adding value by telling you being vulnerable. Sometimes you feel like you're not.
Right.
But you got to be you.
Right.
So that's kind of what people get with me. I'm going to be straightforward. I'm going to be blunt, and you're going to hear stuff about me that probably is iffy for me to even say half the time.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be straightforward and honest with you, because if I tell you what happened in my past, or hey, what I've struggled with, or hey, what I've overcome, what's that going to do for you?
Right.
You may or may not ever need that. You may look at me, and the people that look at me and they say, oh shit, you want to start judging? Cool. Fuck them. Yep. That's fine with me. I mean, you could judge all day long, but you know what? I'm going to give you 100% of me for the betterment of you, whether it helps you, whether it doesn't.
Yep.
It doesn't matter to me. At least I gave you, I put out there what I thought would help
Right.
if I thought you were ready to that point where you wanted to actually do the changing.
You're gonna like chapter 6.
Yeah.
It's gonna
Oh,
make sense to you.
I'm off tomorrow, so you know what? I think we're what, an hour ahead of you guys. So
Yeah.
probably by the time you shoot me a text tomorrow and ask me how I liked how the podcast went, and I'm gonna be like, dude, I'm on chapter 7 because I decided not to sleep. So
Yep.
yeah, dude, it's been good stuff, man. That so far, what I've read, I mean, like I said, I haven't put the book down much. So I was sitting here reading it right before you said, hey, I'm ready to go. I was sitting here reading, and I was like, dude, do you think I can get through halfway through the 3rd chapter before you ask me if I'm ready to go? I got your text, and I'm like sitting here messing around with the headphones too late because I was reading the book. So
Love it, man. I'm not even mad. I can't be mad at that.
no.
Well, Chad, what do you think? Should we wrap it up?
I think we should, because I mean, there's not much else I can say other than, hey, I'm rowing an ocean and I'm doing it for veterans mental health. But yeah, no, man, I think there's been a lot of good stuff.
Well, let's
Well,
wrap it up with the message that I love to bring to it, bring to the closing of this. So, if there was a message you could leave the world, what would it be?
I would say, be the change, be the fight. I mean, I've been at the bottom. I had a chance to stay at the bottom. Like, everyone's going to get knocked down. Everyone's going to find themselves in the bottom. And when you find yourself at the bottom, you're ready to make that change. You put your foot, one foot after the other. You keep pushing. You be the change. Don't just stop with yourself. You know where you came from. Don't allow other people to be down there. I mean, I wouldn't say that everyone's meant to row an ocean, but everyone's meant to do great things. I honestly believe that everyone has a purpose. Everyone has a reason to be here, and everyone can contribute. I've met some pretty awesome people in my life. I met some poor people in my life, but I would say that every one of those people that I've met in my life has an opportunity to do something great. And so go out, find yourself someone you can lean on, find a battle buddy, go out there and do big things. Like, if it seems like it's crazy, but you can follow that with passion and it's for something you believe in, ride that wave.
Yeah.
If it comes back to you reaching out to me and telling me, hey, I want to row an ocean, cool. I'll send you in the right direction. I mean, you have the right cause, the right reason behind why you want to do it. Let's get you in a boat. It's one of those things. We get done with this podcast and you start thinking as you're writing your next book, hey, I want to write a book while I'm in the ocean. And Dylan, you reach out to me, because that's like I said, it's all about doing big things, man. I think that everyone has a purpose, and I think everyone should continue to search till you find that.
It definitely speaks to me. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that'll go out with my buddy in -35 and go camping.
Right.
So I'm it. I got to be careful here because I might just do something like that. So
Yeah.
we'll
I
be in
did tell
touch.
that before.
Obviously, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I told someone that before, and there was the kind of person that I know that when they hear stuff, it's like once it gets in their ear,
Yeah.
then you can see the gears are turning. So I have a lot of people that say that. And one guy messaged me on social media the other day that said,
Yeah.
it's a great idea. I'd love to get involved, but I'm 49. I'm like, that's a cool story. The last guy that wrote it was the oldest guy that wrote it was like 77.
Yeah.
So cool
I
story.
I wouldn't doubt it if we have that conversation someday, but I've got a lot of things I got to take care of before I get to that point. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Keep writing the books, man. What am I going to read while I'm out there?
Right. Well, I'll write you another one. How about that?
I appreciate it. That would be phenomenal. I could get through this one first. So
You guys are leaving in December?
December of 2022. So we're about that 500-day mark where we're going to really start hitting the training next summer. So we have a ton of certifications we got to complete. So
I might be able to get a book out by then. We'll see. I'll let you know. We'll be
you
in
get a
touch.
book out. You get a book out closer, then I will wait until I'm on that boat for something to read. I'll probably kill it like the first day and then regret reading it so fast. But hey,
We'll see. Well, we'll see. Well, Chad, this is an absolute honor to talk to you, and I know that we'll be keeping in touch, and I'll be following your journey for sure. So
for sure,
yeah.
I'm pumped, man. I'm I'm pumped to see what you got in store as well.
Likewise. Likewise. Well, Chad, again, thank you. And for all of you that made it to as long as we've been doing this, thanks for joining us on this week's episode. This has been awesome. I love
Yeah.
listening, brother, and it's been great. Join us. I don't know when. I'm gonna be gone for a month and a half, so I don't know when I'm gonna be putting this one out. I don't know when people
Okay.
are hearing this, so um, yeah, just keep tabs on me. I'll be pushing out more podcast episodes when I get back. So, guys, we'll see you next time on the Dylan Experience. Take care of yourselves.
Yeah, thanks, man.